First of all, I want to reference you to an article in the Wall Street Journal from March 31st of 2012, last year. I'm going to read you a couple of quotes. So it was a very long-ranging article, and it was largely about the church and politics and Obamacare and all that business and stuff. But if I'm going to read from the screen here some things that were in this article, and the article was the interviewer asked Cardinal Dolan, he was the subject, what about the argument that vast numbers of Catholics ignore the church's teaching about sexuality? Doesn't the church have a problem conveying its moral principles to its own flock? That was the question. Cardinal Dolan answered, do we ever? I'm not afraid to admit that we have an internal catechetical challenge, a towering one, in convincing our own people of the moral beauty and coherence of what we teach. That's a biggie. And then the article goes on, for this he faults church leadership. Good for him. Quote, we have gotten gun-shy in speaking with any amount of cogency on chastity and sexual morality. Let me quote that again. We, meaning leadership, have gotten gun-shy in speaking with any amount of cogency on chastity and sexual morality. The article says he dates this diffidence to the mid and late 1960s, when the whole world seemed to be caving in and where Catholics in general got the impression that what the Second Vatican Council taught first and foremost is that we should be chums with the world, and that the best thing the church can do is become more and more like everybody else, close quote. The flashpoint, he said, was Humane Vitae, Pope Paul VI's 1968 encyclical, reasserting the church's teachings on sex, marriage, and reproduction, including its opposition to artificial contraception. And the last section here, it brought such a tsunami of dissident departure, disapproval of the church, that I think most of us, and I'm using the first person plural intentionally, including myself, the cardinal speaking of himself, kind of subconsciously said, whoa, we better never talk about that because it's just too hot to handle. We forfeited the chance to be a coherent moral voice when it comes to one of the more burning issues of the day. Well said, Your Eminence. Well said. That was a year and a half, more than a year and a half ago, and you haven't changed anything. You still say absolutely nothing about these moral teachings except when you're questioned by them. You refuse, and many, many, many of your brother bishops in the American hierarchy absolutely refuse to bring up these topics. And this isn't our opinion. We're going to let you tell Dick Gregory on Meet the Press. We're going to roll a clip where this very topic came up. Roll the clip, guys.
But he said we cannot insist only on issues related to abortion, gay marriage, and the use of contraceptive methods. He talked about there being too much obsession within the church about talking about those issues.
Because most of the time I say, well, I don't know if it's so much the church is obsessed with that. It's the world that's obsessed with those things. They're always asking us about it. I look at myself, David, in my almost 37 years as a priest. Rare would be the times that I preached about those issues.
Condemned from his own mouth. Rare. 37 years as a priest, and the last number of them as a bishop and a cardinal, a prince of the church, and he admits himself rare that he has preached on these issues. Excuse me, Your Eminence, but with all the respect I can muster, these are the issues that send souls to hell, not your precious immigration legislation. It is ridiculous. You sit there in this article from a year and a half ago and say we've gotten gun shy, we shouldn't have said this, we've given up our own equivalency of being able to speak on any of these things, and a year and 7 months later you sit there and go, oh no, it's just the world that cares about those things. We all talk about this, that, we don't talk about those things. Yeah, those hot button issues. What are Catholics to think when their leaders sit there and almost smugly, ha-haing, laughing it up, like bon vivant, here's my scotch in one hand and my cigar in the other, and we don't preach on those things because we want to be the church of nice. This garbage has got to end. It isn't enough to get into the Wall Street Journal a year and a half ago and admit what everybody, even the dead, can see with their own eyes, that you have not preached on any of this stuff for going on 2 successive generations, and the church is falling apart because of it, because nobody knows what the church teaches. Nobody. You won't say it, and then you get all this wonderful cover. Oh, we're just going to preach about joy, aren't we? I'd like to read a letter from a priest, because in case you think this is the rantings and the ravings of a lunatic layman, here's a priest. This father, very nice father, who's on the board of the American Life League, Father William Kaczynski, wrote this, and it's going all over the blogs too. It's an open letter to His Eminence Cardinal Dolan. It's very long. I can't read all of it, but I've highlighted a few of the parts in it here. Quote, perhaps it just boils down to the fact that we meaning the church, are not opinion molders, but gospel proclaimers. Are we becoming timid because those wanting legal recognition of unnatural unions unjustly say we are mean or bigoted? Oh, you can't be mean. Oh my gosh, that's the worst sin you can commit, is to be offensive. Contrary to what certain forces may wish us to believe, the folks in the pews are not hearing about the evils of abortion, homosexual lifestyles, or contraception, and we have that right from the Cardinal's own mouth right there. 37 years a priest, I rarely preach on these things. A majority of Catholics, according to polls, would tell you that all of the above grave sins are licit. Could that be in part because of our failure to admonish the sinner and instruct the ignorant? Can it be that we are failing to show mercy and love by not clearly addressing these iniquities? And it may be that we are showing a certain lack of trust in the good Lord to move the hearts He has prepared for the message we bring in His name. For example, it does not seem helpful that we ministers have equivocated on or neglected to pronounce central moral truths, all the while giving rigidly dogmatic support for things about which reasonable people can legitimately differ. Read immigration reform. Many faithful are pained by an attitude which would bring a bishop, and this is what he did in another part of the Meet the Press show, to bring a bishop to chastise an entire political party over immigration reform, yet give no mention to the other political party that has in its platform the promotion of the murder of babies by untold millions. God bless you, Father Kaczynski, for saying that. I'm sorry to say it on the show now. Some fake Orthodox bishop or bishops will probably slam you off to Our Lady of the Garbage Dump for coming out saying the truth. This almost two-faced doublespeak, oh, we need to do all this and then do nothing about it. For year after year, generation after generation on the part of the American hierarchy, this has got to come to an end. What are you afraid of? Stand up and say contraception is evil. You're not fighting the HHS mandate because of some religious liberty thing. We have a religious liberty principle about that because it's evil. People go to hell. Do you not care about these things? Are you in the church of nice, the church of man? Or are you in the church that our blessed Lord founded and you're one of the leaders? You're all the leaders of it. Where are you, besides plotting behind the scenes to silence Orthodox Catholics? When we come back, Judie Brown is going to be here from the American Life League, and she's going to be talking to us. I'd like to introduce to you Judie Brown, the founder, the everything of the American Life League. Judie, how are you? Judie is the obviously the president and co-founder. She's known all over the country, all over the world. She's an author, a syndicated columnist, has fought for the rights of the unborn tirelessly. This article that came out here, we're going to pop it up on the screen for you. This article with from the Catholic News Service, which, Judie, if I'm right, isn't that the bishops, the USCCB's news service?
No, actually, that was the conservative news service.
I was sitting there going, okay, got it. Well, wonderful, longtime advocates for the truth and Catholic right and might and everything else. And, Judie, I'm going to read to you something you said. Something that you were quoted in, and it says, where are we here? Dolan is a media darling. They promote him as the preeminent Catholic speaker in the United States because they know what he's saying suits their agenda, not what the church teaches. And we're going to play a little clip right now, the clip designed for you in this part of the show, clip number 3, guys. Talking about from the Meet the Press interview where he talks about how the bishops in the church would be cheerleaders for Obama if it weren't for this one particular part of Obamacare. Play the clip, guys.
We bishops have been really kind of in a tough place because we're for universal, comprehensive, life-affirming health care. We, the bishops of the United States, can you believe it, in 1919, came out for more affordable, more comprehensive, more universal health care. That's how far back we go in this battle, okay? So we're not Johnny-come-latelys. We've been asking for reform in health care for a long time. So we were kind of an early supporter in this. Where we started bristling and saying, uh-oh, first of all, this isn't comprehensive because it's excluding the undocumented immigrant and it's excluding the unborn baby. So we began to bristle at that. And then secondly, we said, and wait a minute, we Catholics who are kind of among the pros when it comes to providing health care, do it because of our religious conviction and because of the dictates of our conscience, and now we're being asked to violate some of those. So that's when we began to worry and draw back and say, Mr. President, please, you're really kind of pushing aside some of your greatest supporters here. We want to be with you. We want to be strong. And if you keep doing this, we're not going to be able to be one of your cheerleaders. And that, sadly, is what happened.
Judy, the line quoted for you about that in the CNS article says, quote, "How dare he say that Catholics should be cheerleaders of Obamacare? He's a pathetic example of a shepherd of the Catholic Church." What say you, Ms. Brown?
Well, I will repeat that again, if you wish. And the problem with Cardinal Dolan is quite simply his politics. He is a dyed-in-the-wool Democrat, an Irish Democrat. But his calling in the church as a cardinal, as a bishop, as a priest, is to imitate Christ on earth, not emulate the principles of the Democratic Party. And unfortunately, what he's done in this interview and so many other interviews over the course of his reign in the Archdiocese of New York is insult the church, if you will, because he'd rather be the media darling of the major networks than be the teacher and preacher of the good news of Jesus Christ. And I say that with all humility because my closest friend in the entire world in the hierarchy when he was alive was Cardinal John Cardinal O'Connor.
Wonderful man. I knew him personally.
Well, then you know exactly what I'm saying. And Cardinal O'Connor would never have perceived himself as giving interviews on Meet the Press and or in fact, he would have turned them down because he was too busy teaching and preaching. He's the one bishop at the time that the catechism came out who gave homilies for an entire year so that he covered every aspect of the catechism with his flock. Not so with this current cardinal in New York. Cardinal Dolan is just, I mean, it's unforgivable what he said because when you watch Meet the Press and you listen to Cardinal Dolan, the average human being who is watching that interview honestly believes that there's absolutely nothing wrong with Barack Obama, that the cardinal only wishes that he'd change his mind on religious liberty and everything would be fine. And of course, we all know that Obama is the godfather of the abortion movement in this country now. Contraception, Planned Parenthood, euthanasia, you name it.
He's exporting it all over the world, all of the foreign aid. When, all this money goes to these different disasters and all, they immediately go, well, you said no to us before, but now before we help you, we're going to tie our money to you accepting abortion, contraception, or they do it in Haiti, in the Philippines, Africa, everywhere.
Well, when I wrote my book, The Broken Path, which is about the bishops and their tragic involvement in American politics, I actually sent the cardinal a copy of it and I invited him, as I did every other bishop, to read the book. Not because I have a desire to criticize the bishops, but because I have a desire for Catholics to understand that the reason that the pro-life movement has been stuck in the mud for 40 years is the bishops. If the bishops actually raised their voice against the killing of the innocent, abortion would be no more in this country.
It's funny, Judy, if you go down the USCCB, the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops website, if you go down that website and you look at all the different press releases and things like that, if you were just kind of keeping a little tally sheet on the side and you drew it into, two columns, pro-life, anti-abortion, anti-contraception, whatever, a column, and then over here you had immigration, you'd run out of ink putting check marks into the comments and press releases about immigration. How do you say this any clearer? People do not go to hell for their stances on immigration.
That's right. Nor do they go to hell for their stances on capital punishment.
Right.
But they do go to hell for killing babies and destroying the souls of teenagers. And this is what we would like the cardinals and the bishops and the priests of the Catholic Church to teach to the people in the pew instead of politicizing the church. And you know, the saddest part about all of this at the end of the day, Michael, is it is not indicative of just Cardinal Dolan.
No.
The Catholic Church throughout the country has been in the pocket of the federal government taking money for their various activities for a very long time.
Yep.
And this is just a result of it. Cardinal Dolan's position on Obamacare is a result of being more political than more Catholic on the part of far too many bishops. And I have to say, I know some very heroic bishops.
Yes, there are some very, you know, and I think we need to give kudos. We try to do it almost every show, but I have to tell you, Bishop Thomas John Paprocki in Springfield, Illinois.
Yes.
God love that man. God love everybody. That's right. And Bishop Paprocki in Springfield, Illinois. I mean, that everything regarding the exorcism that the exorcism prayers and service that he had in his cathedral when the Catholic governor of Illinois signed gay marriage, same-sex marriage, whatever the diabolical thing is, signed that in. So bishops, why are we counting 2, 3, 4 of those bishops among 300 or 400, and the others sit on the air and say what they want to say? It's beyond the pale. It's beyond the pale.
Yes, but it's the reason that the Catholic Church is losing so many members. It's the reason why 92% of those who claim to be Catholic favor abortion, favor choice, favor contraception, favor Obamacare. And it's because they are not educated. And the reason why they're not educated and catechized properly rests at the feet of those ordained into the priesthood who are responsible for teaching and feeding the flock. And they're not doing it.
I think we have to make clear here, Judie, because obviously you and I are on the same page as this, along with many other faithful Catholics who are greatly disturbed at this. But we want these princes of the church, these shepherds of the church, to finally stand up, throw off all the chum of the world, to quote the cardinal himself, and stand up and be the God-centered, Christ-like leaders of the church so we can begin to fight this culture back in one single blow. And I really, honest to God, don't think, after speaking with various bishops all over the world, it's a horrible thing to think, and I'd like your reaction to this, that so many of these leaders certainly don't appear to any longer have supernatural faith. They simply don't believe.
Well, you've said it, and I heard this years ago in the 1980s from the then spiritual director of American Life League, because we were agonizing at the time about pro-abortion Catholics advocating for abortion, even before we began the Canon 915 campaign. And he came back from a meeting in the Vatican. He was very close to Pope John Paul II and to Mother Teresa, and he said that the problem with the bishops who claim that they don't have to have a position, they don't have to preach on abortion every Sunday, which is one of the things Dolan said he rarely ever taught on, is that they don't have faith in the presence of Christ in the Eucharist. And once that disappears, none of the other teachings of the church make sense. And so they don't teach, but they don't teach because they don't believe. And I'm afraid that is the correct analysis of our current day situation in most of the situations that the bishops are involved in, not all. And I have to say that I wish that they'd spend as much time talking about the alienated child in the womb whose civil rights are violated every 30 seconds, and less time talking about immigration, which is a political problem. Mm-hmm. There's no question about it, and it's not being handled correctly. But nobody's being directly murdered, and babies are dying.
Yeah, by the thousands every day.
And bishops are looking.
Think about how, you get the leaders you deserve. It happened to Israel, to the Jews in the Old Testament. It has happened from time to time here. You think about, look how easily the church fell apart in England during the time of the Reformation. And when the push came to the shove, one bishop out of 36 stood up and said, no, I'm for Christ and the church, had his head lopped off, and the others just, went their way. And St. John Eudes said the surest sign of God's punishment on his people is that he installs bad shepherds over them. And how can anyone sit here and say that these sorts of continual gyrations and, linking arms with Obama and smiling and laughing, the whole thing is rotten. It stinks to the core. And I think you nailed it, Judy. I think it is exactly because they don't have the supernatural faith in the real presence anymore. That's why they can distribute Holy Communion to Joe Biden and Nancy Pelosi and make up excuses that, oh, it's not Canon 915, it's Canon 916. Wrong. That applies. The supreme jurist in the church, Cardinal Burke, has said, no, you are wrong, cardinals and bishops. 915 applies, and they must be denied Holy Communion. Why don't they care about not denying them Holy Communion? Because you got to say, do these guys really believe that's Jesus' body, blood, soul, and divinity? Because if it is, it sure is a weird way to treat it.
I think it is diabolical. I think the devil's having a field day right now in the church, and it's my hope and prayer that he gets cut off at the knees real soon.